Look closely at this man. He's wearing a janitor's uniform, pushing a cleaning cart through the sterile hallways of a maximum security prison. He keeps his head down. He's trying to look invisible, trying to blend into the background. But there are two massive problems. First, this is the North Fraser Pre-Trial Center in British Columbia. It's a multi-million-dollar facility, one of the most technologically advanced jails in Canada. It was designed to be escape-proof, but we hear that a lot on Films Uncovered, don't we? Second, the man with the mop isn't a cleaner. He is Omid Tahvili, the Tony Soprano of Vancouver, a millionaire kingpin of the Persian mafia. A man so ruthless he was convicted of kidnapping and horrific torture over missing drug money. And right now, he is seconds away from freedom. Now watch the guard walking beside him. This officer, Edwin Tiknney, holds the keys to every door in the facility. He is sworn to keep men like Tahvili locked up. He should be sounding the alarm. He should be tackling Tahvili to the ground. Instead, he unlocks the door. Then the next one. And then the next one. And the one after that? This isn't a breakout. It's just a walkout. It happened on November 15th, 2007. Omid Tahvili didn't need tunnels, helicopters, or weapons. All he needed was a janitor's uniform, a promise of $50,000, and one desperate, broken prison guard willing to betray everything. This is the story of the most humiliating prison escape in Canadian history. An inside job caught entirely on camera, which put one of the world's most dangerous criminals back on the street. And the fate of the guard who helped him? It's more pathetic than you can imagine. The kingpin. To understand how this happened, you have to first understand who Omid Tahvili was. He wasn't some low-level drug dealer. Tahvili was a boss. Born in Tehran, Iran in 1970, Tahvili arrived in Canada in 1994. It didn't take him long to recognize that crime paid, and he was very good at it. By the early 2000s, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, recognized Tahvili as the head of one of the most significant criminal organizations in Western Canada. Dozens of people worked under him, moving cocaine, ecstasy, and other drugs across the country. He lived the life. Luxury cars, high-end condos, designer suits. He was the self-styled Nino Brown, a reference to the untouchable drug lord from the movie New Jack City. And he demanded respect. He built his empire on two things: intelligence and absolute ruthlessness. His intelligence was evident in his sophisticated operations. While managing the drug trade, he simultaneously ran a massive international telemarketing scam. This operation specifically targeted elderly Americans. Between 1999 and 2002, Tahvili and his crew would call vulnerable victims, telling them they had won a lottery but needed to pay taxes or fees up front to collect their winnings. It was a cruel scam, and it netted over $3 million. The operation was so large that the FBI was actively hunting him, issuing federal warrants for mail fraud and wire fraud. But it was his ruthlessness that kept him in power. In 2005, $300,000 of Tahvili's drug money vanished. He suspected one of his couriers had stolen the cash and fled to Vietnam. Tahvili didn't write it off as a loss. He needed to send a message. Instead, he kidnapped the courier's brother-in-law. What followed was hours of brutal interrogation. Tahvili didn't just beat the man, he systematically tortured and sexually assaulted him, determined to find out where the money had gone. The victim was eventually let go, broken and terrified. But he made a choice. He went to the police. This act of extreme violence was Tahvili's downfall. He was arrested soon after. The untouchable kingpin was finally caged. The fortress? In July 2005, Tahvili was sent to the North Fraser Pre-Trial Center, the NFPC, to await trial. This wasn't some crumbling old jail. Opened in 2001, NFPC was a state-of-the-art maximum security facility. It used a modern design where guards monitored everything from elevated, secure control centers. The technology was top tier. The doors were reinforced steel and the movement of inmates was highly restricted. In its 6 years of operation, no one had ever escaped. It was supposed to be impenetrable. Tahvili hated it. He was a man used to control, used to luxury, used to power. Now, he was just another inmate in a jumpsuit. His trial was a disaster for him. The evidence of the kidnapping and assault was overwhelming. In October 2007, he was convicted on all counts: kidnapping, sexual assault, unlawful confinement, uttering threats, and causing bodily harm. He hadn't been sentenced yet, but the outlook was bleak. The prosecution was asking for 15 years, and that wasn't even the worst part. While in custody, the British Columbia Supreme Court had ordered his extradition to the United States in May 2007 to face the fraud charges, and he was awaiting his appeal. That meant if he lost the appeal, the moment he finished his Canadian sentence, he would be shipped straight to a US federal prison for decades more. Omid Tahvili, at 37 years old, was looking at the prospect of dying in prison. For a man who saw himself as a king, this was unacceptable. He had millions of dollars stashed away, he had international connections from Europe to the Middle East, and he refused to let the system win. He was so confident that he openly boasted to the other inmates and staff. He told them, "I will not be here for my sentencing." They laughed it off. Where was he going to go? But Tahvili was already analyzing the prison. He knew the walls were too thick, the fences too high, and the technology too advanced for a traditional escape. But every system, no matter how advanced, has one vulnerability: the people running it. Tahvili needed an inside man. The weak link. He watched the guards, he looked for weakness, and he found the perfect target. Edwin Tiknney was a corrections officer at North Fraser. On the surface, he was just a regular guard, a 35-year-old family man with about 10 years of experience. But beneath the uniform, Tiknney was drowning. He was suffering from what psychiatrists later called a major depressive episode. The stress of working in a maximum security environment, combined with family issues, was crushing him. But his biggest secret, the one that made him truly vulnerable, was his addiction. Tiknney was a pathological gambler. He was deep in debt, the kind of debt that makes you desperate. He was also struggling with alcohol abuse. In short, Edwin Tiknney was weak, broken, and desperate for money. Omid Tahvili, a sophisticated manipulator who had spent his life exploiting weakness, recognized this instantly. The corruption didn't happen overnight. It likely began small. A conversation here, a shared joke there. Tahvili was charismatic. He knew how to make people feel important. He started grooming Tiknney. He listened to his problems, sympathized with his financial stress. Tahvili wasn't just an inmate to Tiknney, he became a confidant. This is how organized crime corrupts officials. They don't walk up on the first day and offer a bribe. They build a relationship. They find the pressure point, and then they squeeze. Once Tahvili felt the time was right, he made the offer. The deal was simple: $50,000 cash. For Tahvili, $50,000 was pocket change. For Tiknney, it was a lifeline. It was a way out of debt, a way to stop the suffocating pressure of his gambling losses. Tiknney agreed. He was willing to risk his career, his reputation, and his own freedom to help one of the most dangerous men in the facility escape. The plan. With Tiknney compromised, they began to plan. The plan had to be simple. It had to rely entirely on Tiknney's access and avoid any scrutiny from other guards or the advanced security systems. The solution was brilliant in its audacity. Tahvili would impersonate a contractor, specifically a janitor. Cleaners moved through the facility constantly. They were practically invisible. If Tahvili could get a uniform, and if Tiknney was the one escorting him, they could potentially walk straight through the security checkpoints. The plan relied on the assumption that other guards wouldn't look too closely at a janitor being escorted by a trusted officer. They were banking on human complacency, the fatal flaw in any secure system. But the risks were enormous. North Fraser had multiple secure checkpoints between the living units and the outside world. Each one required authorization. If a single guard recognized Tahvili, or if Tiknney hesitated even for a second, the plan would collapse. As November 2007 progressed, the pressure mounted. Tahvili's sentencing hearing was just weeks away. He knew he was running out of time. They set the date, Thursday, November 15th. The walk. When the day arrived, the crucial part was the disguise. Somehow, Tahvili acquired an authentic janitor's uniform. The shirt, the pants, everything needed to look the part. He also got a cleaning cart, complete with a mop and a bucket. The escape began during the evening. Staff movement can be higher at that time, which may have made their transit less conspicuous. Tahvili changed into the uniform. He was no longer the feared crime boss, but a humble cleaner. He met up with Edwin Tiknney. This was the moment of truth. Tiknney had to lead Tahvili through 4 highly secure security gates. If he backed out now, he knew Tahvili's organization might come for him. He was committed. He started walking. Tahvili pushed the cart, deliberately keeping his head down, trying to obscure his face from cameras positioned on the ceiling. Tiknney was the escort, the man with the authority. The entire sequence was captured by the prison's closed-circuit television cameras, providing a chilling, silent movie of the escape. They approached the first secure door. This required Tiknney to use his authorization to unlock it. Tiknney was already suffering from depression and anxiety. He had to appear completely normal, like he was just escorting a janitor to a different section of the prison. He initiated the unlock sequence. The lock clicked open. They just walked through, one down. They continued through the sterile corridors. Tahvili was deep inside the secure perimeter of a maximum security facility, just walking freely now. They approached the second gate. Again, Tiknney used his access. He maintained his composure. He was betraying his colleagues, undermining the entire justice system, but he didn't falter. He was thinking about the money. Click! The second door opened. They were getting closer to the administrative area, the least secure part of the facility. The third gate was the critical juncture, separating the high-security inmate areas from the access zones leading to the exit. Other staff were likely present. They walked past offices, past monitoring stations. Did anyone notice the janitor? Did anyone recognize the face of the infamous Omid Tahvili, whose trial had been all over the news? No. They just saw a guard they knew, Edwin Tiknney, and a cleaner pushing a cart. It was routine. It was normal. Complacency had won. Tiknney unlocked the third gate. Click, they passed through. Finally, they reached the last barrier, the front door of the North Fraser Pre-Trial Center. This was it, the threshold between captivity and freedom. Tiknney, focused on the $50,000, the end of his debts, made the final move. He opened the front door. Omid Tahvili, dressed as a janitor, pushed his cleaning cart out into the cool November evening air. He didn't run, he didn't look back, he simply walked away from the prison. A getaway ride may have been arranged nearby. He disappeared into the night. The escape was flawless. The kingpin was free. The discovery? Edwin Tiknney had to walk back into the facility, knowing he had just committed a massive betrayal. He had to finish his shift, pretend nothing had happened. This is where the story gets even more incredible. For hours, internal tracking still suggested Tahvili was in his cell. But later that evening, during a head count around 9:30 p.m., staff realized he was gone. The realization set off panic. The entire facility was put on immediate lockdown. Alarms blared, doors slammed shut, and an emergency response team swarmed the facility. But it was far too late. Tahvili had a massive head start. The administration and the guards were in shock. How could this happen? North Fraser was supposed to be secure. This was the first escape in the prison's history, and it involved one of their most high-profile, dangerous inmates. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police were called in immediately. The investigation began by reviewing the CCTV footage, and that's when the full, humiliating truth was revealed. The footage clearly showed Tahvili in the janitor's uniform. It showed him walking calmly through the facility. And most damningly, it showed corrections officer Edwin Tiknney leading him every step of the way, unlocking the 4 security gates and letting him out the front door. It wasn't a security failure, it was betrayal. The embarrassment for BC Corrections was catastrophic. It It was the first time in the history of the organization that a guard had been charged with helping an inmate escape. The public trust was shattered. How many other guards were compromised? The manhunt. A massive manhunt was launched for Omid Tahvili. Police warned the public that he was dangerous. They knew Tahvili had the resources and the connections to disappear instantly. He had access to forged passports, cash reserves, and international safe houses. They were right. Tahvili had a sophisticated network ready to move him. While the police were setting up roadblocks around the prison, Tahvili was likely already crossing borders, perhaps heading south to the US or preparing to board an international flight. The focus of the investigation quickly turned to Edwin Tiknney. He was arrested on Friday, the day after the escape. Faced with the undeniable evidence of the CCTV footage, Tiknney had no choice. He confessed everything. In April 2008, Edwin Tiknney pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and accepting a bribe. During his sentencing hearing, the full story of his vulnerability came out. His lawyer argued that Tahvili was a sophisticated manipulator who had exploited Tiknney's weakness, his depression, his pathological gambling addiction, and his financial desperation. Tiknney apologized in court, expressing remorse for his actions, but the damage was done. His colleagues at North Fraser felt angry and betrayed. The integrity of the system he was supposed to uphold had been compromised by one of their own. The brutal twist. But here's the final brutal twist in Tiknney's story. He never got the money. After walking Tahvili out, Tiknney finished his shift. According to the plan, he was supposed to meet for the $50,000 cash after work. He waited, but no one showed up. The realization must have been crushing. Tahvili had completely betrayed the man who risked everything for him. He used Tiknney's desperation to gain his freedom and then discarded him without a second thought. The $50,000 promise was just another lie from a master manipulator. One final note on Tiknney's mindset. Psychiatric reports at sentencing described a major depressive episode and pathological gambling. It's plausible he didn't fully grasp the risk or downstream consequences. Records don't document any concrete plan beyond collecting the promised payment, and the judge noted he likely never received the money. What he intended to do afterwards remains unknown. On August 8, 2008, Edwin Tiknney was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months in prison. The judge acknowledged that time in prison would be especially hard for a former corrections officer who would certainly need to be kept in protective custody, isolated from the general population for his own safety. The ghost? While Tiknney was heading to prison, Omid Tahvili was living the high life. A few weeks after the escape, Tahvili was sentenced in absentia, meaning while he was absent, to 11 years for the kidnapping and assault. It was a meaningless gesture. Tahvili had achieved what few others could. He had beaten the system and vanished without a trace. His notoriety only grew, turning him into a legend of the underworld. In April 2008, Forbes.com compiled a list of the world's 10 most wanted fugitives, consulting with law enforcement agencies globally. The list included the most infamous names on the planet: Osama bin Laden, the head of Al-Qaeda, and Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the leader of the Sinaloa cartel. And right there among them was Omid Tahvili. The international manhunt spanned continents. The FBI still wanted him for the $3 million fraud against the elderly. The RCMP wanted him for his escape and his organized crime activities. Interpol issued a red notice requesting his arrest worldwide. There were rumors and sightings everywhere. Some said he fled to Europe, Germany, or the Netherlands, where he had strong criminal connections. But the most prevalent theory was that he returned to his native Iran. Iran does not have an extradition treaty with Canada or the United States, making him virtually untouchable. In a bizarre incident shortly before Tiknney's sentencing, Tahvili reportedly contacted the police himself. He called the RCMP, claiming he was in Toronto and wanted to negotiate his return to British Columbia. Law enforcement took it seriously, mobilizing resources to track the call, but it led nowhere. It seemed Tahvili was just taunting them, playing games, and proving he could still move freely even within Canada. The aftermath. The escape forced North Fraser Pre-Trial Center to conduct a full-scale security review. Procedures were tightened. Background checks on staff were likely intensified, and the complacency that allowed Tahvili to walk out the front door was shattered. But the stain on their reputation remained. The escape-proof prison had been defeated by a mop and a bribe. Edwin Tiknney served his sentence and was eventually released. A broken man who had lost his career, his reputation, and his freedom for a bribe he never received. He faded into obscurity, a casualty of Omid Tahvili's manipulation. And Tahvili? He's still out there. It's been nearly 2 decades since he walked out of that prison dressed as a janitor. He would be in his mid-50s today. Despite the international warrants and the most wanted status, he has never been caught. Omid Tahvili, the Nino Brown of Vancouver, remains an international fugitive, a ghost who achieved the perfect escape. Therefore, if you loved the thrill of how the mafia boss escaped from prison and never got caught, then we can bet you'll love the film of John Dillinger, the man who became public enemy #1, got jailed twice, and fled both times like no prison was built to cage him, popped on the upper left of your screen.